everybody. I am Brooke Warner, and I am here with Grant Faulkner. We're Memoir Nation. Hey, Grant.
Hey, Brooke, and hello, memoirists and memoir lovers and storytellers. Good to see you all.
Yeah, and we're starting these video segments. We're calling it All Things Memoir because it turns out that there is a lot going on in the world of memoir, everyone. There are memoirs themselves, but there are also movies, and there's a lot to say about the craft of memoir. And there are also national and international stories about memoir because really, Grant, at the end of the day, memoir is personal story, and so it's all around us, and we want to bring stuff to our community's attention through these little dispatches. So we're going to give it a go.
Yeah, that's right, Brooke. And today we're getting together to talk about a recent controversy surrounding The Tell. The memoir, it's called The Tell by Amy Griffin. And this memoir, it's been all the rage. It's sold well over 100,000 books. It's been an Oprah Book Club pick, and it seems very, celebrity. It seems like a very celebrity influencer in the world, from Gwyneth Paltrow to Reese Witherspoon to Jenna Bush has endorsed her in the book. And the book's been very well received, but then questions emerged, enough so that the New York Times just ran a bit of an expose about the book this week in an article called "The Billionaire, the Psychedelics, and the Best-Selling Memoir." How can you not click on that, folks?
I couldn't stop myself.
Yeah, it was published on September 24th. And Brooke, do you want to give the highlights or the part that you think matters to memoirists about this story?
Yeah, I mean, we might have to pile on here about what matters about it because what's interesting to me is the part about the recovered memories. The book is a lot about her recovered memories of abuse, and that's in fact quite important. I mean, I have people who are important in my life who have had recovered memories of abuse. And so it kind of ties into the Me Too movement and to believing women. In fact, the original title of this book, The Tell, was something like Believe Me. And so those things really matter in memoir. But in this book, she accuses a middle school teacher of raping her and, other atrocities, very, very hard subject matter material. And these kinds of books that are about abuse, they're very helpful to readers, especially to readers who have gone through stuff like this themselves. And so what this article is about is whether or not it's actually true. It questions her version of events because the people at the Times have gone in and interviewed people from where Amy grew up in Texas. Also, I think notably, and the reason that questions have come to light is because no one else has come forward to accuse this teacher of abuse, which is very unusual. Usually these kinds of people or this kind of crime is a pattern of behavior, and they haven't seen this in this case. And so it's distressing. I really do hate it when memoir comes to light, that is not true, possibly not true. And so I have to say, I read this with a bit of my heart sinking into my stomach, Grant.
Yeah, I totally get that. And it's interesting to me because we have this ongoing discussion kind of like, what is memoir? Or we have had it. And for me, coming from the fictional world, I used to say that memoir is storytelling just like a novel is. But of course, that's not true. Memoir is a step toward becoming essentially a journalist or a reporter, because your intention and kind of your promise, your pledge, your contract with the reader is that you're representing truth the best that you can, and obviously each of us have a truth. We live by a truth. That truth is a story, though, that we've made up and that we're telling ourselves in the world. And so a lot of things go into truth that I think we have to, suss out, as writing a memoir. It's really about your best intention towards telling the truth. So you have to recreate dialogue, you have to go back into scenes and say, to the best of my memory, this happened,
Right.
And so in some ways, this memoir is, it's really walking that thin line, because it's saying, I'm telling you my truth, but my truth happens to be, it could be a dream, but it happens to be like, taking hallucinatory drugs and discovering something about myself. And I don't deny that one can do that and find a truth. I just think it probably needs to be really properly framed so that you're not harming anyone, especially if you're accusing somebody for something as serious as this. And I haven't read the memoir, so I don't know if it was framed like that. And, a lot's made out of very little. it sounds like people have been harmed by this, and so maybe some more care should have gone into the framing of the story. But it's definitely a big story now that the New York Times went out with it, and it's casting doubt on Amy's memoir in the way that doubt was cast on James Fry for A Million Little Pieces and Greg Mortensen for Three Cups of Tea.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the part that I am interested in. I mean, I appreciate that you're bringing in the hallucinogenics and like a lot of people that are doing this kind of therapy lately too,
Right.
that in some ways is like celebrated in our culture, that this is a way to, deal with trauma. And I certainly
Mm-hmm.
believe that that's true, but you're right. We have to be very careful. And one of the other parts of the story that was interesting to me from a publishing standpoint is that her publisher, Dial Press, has been like, this is not really our problem. We're not investigators. We take the authors at their word. And I've been in that position. We have published abuse memoirs, and we're not interrogating the authors or necessarily, like flying ourselves to the person who's being accused and, trying to back the different versions of events. And so this is really sticky, from a publishing standpoint too, and who has the accountability and where is this going from here. And if the guy is not guilty, then his life has been ruined.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot here to mull over, and it's why we wanted to talk about it today. I mean, I hope that this segment, Grant, will be to introduce things that we're curious about, and as I said earlier, things that are memoir or memoir adjacent in the culture, food for thought, but certainly no answers here.
Yeah, definitely not. Now I'm wondering if she is a good candidate to write a second memoir about the writing of this memoir and the fallout of it, because we don't know really what her motivations have been. They sound complicated, and she likely really does believe, as I said, what happened to her happened, and this is really just a tangled mess, and the story leaves a distaste across so many fronts. And the fact that at the center of this, is a teacher, again, who we don't know anything about. He wasn't named, but I guess he was like easy to identify in that small community.
Right.
And so he may or may not be guilty, and there's a presumed guilt happening just from the publication of the book that's unique to this milieu. So she doesn't have to prove anything, and if he mounts a defense, that's very public and very expensive.
That's right. Yeah. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Again, this is kind of a new segment for us. If you're listening, watching on YouTube, please subscribe. We're building this channel. We're going to be bringing you a lot more content. So welcome to this aspect of Memoir Nation. Thanks for listening. Again, put your thoughts and ideas in the comments. We're super interested in generating conversations about memoir here every day on our podcast, every day at memoirnation.com. Visit us. And thanks, everybody. And thanks, Grant.
Thank you.